We're starting Be'ezra Hashem, the fourth shir in Sugis in Vayel Moshe, and we're up to the tshuva written by Rav Ovadya Yosef about giving back the West Bank. So last time we talked about the Isser of Lo Yisechanem and the Isser of Lo Yeshvu, and now we're going to talk about the Etzem Inyan of V'shal Shvuos and how Rav Ovadya saw it. So let's take a look. And surprisingly enough, it's very similar to the way the Rebbe looked at things, although there are some differences, and we have to understand what's going on here. Mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael Bizman Hazeh. We're at this paragraph starting Zion, and by the way, this is in Tchumen. This is in Tchumen. It's a journal, a halachic journal, and it's volume 10, page 34. Okay, mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael Bizman Hazeh v'ho Istur Shelo Yisgaris B'umas Ha'olam. Ata Navoy Levar Etzem Hanidoin. Now we will come to explain the main subject here. B'mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael Bizmanenu. L'or divrei Ramban b'hasagois of the Sefer Mitzvahs Mitzvah Daled. The Ramban in his commentary on the Sefer Mitzvahs, Shekostav lahasig al Rambam, that he disagrees with the Rambam. Shaloimana mitzvahs asay shnitzavinu l'reshes arts, that the Rambam doesn't count among his Taryag mitzvahs the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael or conquering Eretz Yisrael. Shenemar v'yirishtem oisav yishavtem ba. The Ramban holds that's a mitzvah. He holds the pasuk saying, "You shall inherit it. You shall displace the inhabitants, whatever, and v'yishavtem ba, and you shall live there." V'hainu shaloi nazva b'yad zu lasenu oy l'shmama. The Ramban says the mitzvah is don't leave it in the hands of another people, and don't leave it empty even. The Chazal kra'uha milchemes mitzvah. Chazal say that conquering the lands is a milchemes mitzvah. Ad kan. So the Ramban says it must be the mitzvah is to conquer, to live in Eretz Yisrael. Nimtza sham milchama laman kibush Eretz Yisrael. Fighting a war to conquer Eretz Yisrael, ulaman tishar b'chez kaseinu, and by extension, if you already have Eretz Yisrael, the milchama to keep it, but not to leave it to others. He milchemes mitzvah. It's a war. It's a mitzvah. V'im came l'chayra ein makom lachush b'zel bikuch nefesh. Oh, so why does this have to do with the subject of giving back the territories? Because what's the reason why Rav Ovadya Yosef holds to give back the territories? He holds to give it back because of Pikuach Nefesh. Because right now, the Palestinians are carrying out Intifada in the 80s. This is written in 1989, by the way. So there's Intifada going on. So in order to save lives, you gotta give them back the territories of the West Bank, and then, okay, that will be like your bargaining chip. You give it to them, and they stop killing.
Does Rav Shach say the same thing somewhere?
Yeah. So
does he have it to Shiloh?
Yeah, he does, and we're going to see it, Mir Hashem. I think today we're going to see it. We might have time today. I don't know. So he says, but here somebody came with a taina to him like this. He said, "What do you hold, Rav Ovadya? You hold you're supposed to give back land to save lives, right? That's a very good svar, right? All things in the Torah, no matter what they are, no matter what kind of mitzvah it is, it's still makom pikuach nefesh. You're mechal Shabbos to save a life, right? If someone tells you, if you put on tefillin now, someone's going to die, so don't put on tefillin and go save his life. Yes, that's what you do, right? You leave the mitzvah on the side and you go do the hatzalas nefashos. So ibazoi, that was.
But then he broke his psak. He said he was against giving back Gush Katif, Gaza.
Well, he said in the Hakdama to this, which we didn't read, that everything he says is only on condition that the experts think that it's going to lead to Pikuach Nefesh, to Hatzalas Nefashos.
That's what Rabbi Soloveitchik said too.
Yeah?
Yeah, he said, when he was asked the Jewish law forbid giving back land, he said, no, he said, leave it to the experts, not to the rabbis.
Yeah. Well, by medicine, by Yom Kippur, if you want to know if someone's able to fast, you ask a doctor, right? You don't ask a rabbi. The rabbi tells you, if the doctor says that he has to eat, then he should eat. But the doctor gets the final word whether he's able to fast or not. So that's what he held here too, that if you have to decide whether it's dangerous or not, whether it's going to save lives or not, you have to ask the experts. Anyway, so the point is, they tied it to him like this. You think that that's pikuch nefesh.
Well, who's an expert? Apparently Ariel Sharon is an expert.
Yeah, the problem is the Zionists aren't really experts because they don't really care about Jewish lives. They're caring about a bunch of other things too.
So that means they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, you have to ask real people who are really...
So who was the real people?
Yeah, I don't know.
Ariel Sharon said yes, and Bibi Netanyahu said no. So who's the expert?
Well, I would think, first of all, it has to be non-elected people. Because elected people are politicians. They have
so who's they?
But if you have people who are, let's say, in the army who know the situation, and they're not motivated by anybody's votes, they just want to know. You ask them, is this going to lead to safety or not? Then they'll tell us.
So that even today, the doctors, the doctor said the anti-lockdown protesters are causing everyone sick, but the BLM are good. 1,300 doctors signed a letter supporting the BLM protest. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Did you see that? This is not an exaggeration. The anti.
Anyway, so here's the argument against him. The argument is all the Torah, all the mitzvahs in the Torah are set aside to save a life, except for the 3 Averos Chamuros. But they said this one is also set aside. Why? He says, "U'kamoshematzinu leminchas chinuch mitzvah tavchav chavhei sheheir al ma shekaseh b'sefer chinuch sham." The Sefer Chinuch says, "Mitzvah la'arog shiva amamin u'lahashmidam." It's a mitzvah to kill the 7 nations. Shenem lo yisachai kol neshama ki achreim takrimeim. U'mi sheba liyado echad mishiva sa'amamin v'haya yachol lahargoi bli sheyistakin b'davar. The Sefer Chinuch says that if you could have killed one of the 7 nations without being in danger, v'avar v'lo hargoi, and he didn't kill him, bitl mitzvah sasei shel hakrim ki achreim takrimeim. He ignored this mitzvah. Milvad she'avar aloy sasei shneim aloy sachai kol neshama. Okay, so the Sefer Chinuch says that the mitzvah is to kill them in a place where you're not going to get in danger. Okay, but if you're in danger, then you're potter. That's what the Sefer Chinuch holds. If you're in danger, if your life will be in danger if you kill one of the 7 nations, then you're potter from the mitzvah. V'tzarachiyun. So the Minchas Chinuch says, how could that be? All other mitzvahs in the Torah are pushed aside to save a life. But this mitzvah, the Torah says to fight a war against the 7 nations. The Torah doesn't rely on nisim. So there were nisim during Yeshua's war. Most of the battles, no Jew was killed, but that's not a necessary precondition for the mitzvah. The mitzvah is just said stam, and therefore in the way of the world, in the nature of the world, that when there's a war, there are casualties on both sides. The Torah says to fight them even though there's a danger. Therefore, there's no cheshbon of sakana in this mitzvah. Therefore, it's a mitzvah to kill the shiva amim even if you get in danger. So, concludes Rav Ovadya, it's not the conclusion, but this is the conclusion of this argument. Who adin kan shaladas the Ramban mitzvahs kibush arts. The Ramban holds that conquering Eretz Yisrael, even forget about the 7 nations, even if Palestinians are there, the Ramban holds it's a mitzvah to conquer Eretz Yisrael, v'achasakasa, and holding on to Eretz Yisrael. Miskayemes al yidei milchama. The only way to do that mitzvah is through a war. So ein lachush bazel isakanas nefashis hanigremes al yidei milchama. Therefore, we don't care about the danger to life. Danger to life is a necessary part of war. So, therefore, you can't give back Eretz Yisrael because of sakanas nefashis. No, because the mitzvah of conquering Eretz Yisrael is doiches sakanas nefashis. Okay, this is the time of the Zionists. So, Rav Ovadya Yosef responds like this: Ulam hinei hagayin Rabbi Yitzchak Dilion b'sefer Megillas Esther Sham kastav liyashiv das Rambam. Megillah Esther comes to answer up why the Rambam shehishmit mitzvah, why he left out this mitzvah. Lefi shesoiver she'ein mitzvahs kibush Eretz Yisrael noiheges el bimei Yoshua v'David. That the conquering of Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah that only applied in the time of Yeshua and David. Uv'chol zman shelo yigol miyal masam, and all the time that they didn't go into Galus. But after the Jews went into Galus, ein mitzvah zu noiheges l'doros. The mitzvah does not apply today. Ela ad boy eis boy Mashiach l'Yisrael, until Mashiach comes. Ki ad rabba amru Chazal b'soif ksubas yishpati eschem and ois Yerushalayim im to'iru v'im to'iru. Chazal say that the oath of exile shelo yalu b'choimet, they should not come up as a wall. Pirush Rashi shelo yalu biyachad biyad chazaka. They shouldn't come up with a strong hand, which either means with massive numbers or it means with an army to conquer. V'shelo yimredu b'umois oilam, not to rebel against the nations. V'shelo yidchaku es haketz, and not to force the end of exile. V'zu lashon Rashbash b'tshuva siman beis. Okay, so that's the Megillah Esther arguing on the Ramban. Okay, so it sounds like the Megillah Esther argues and says, no, the Rambam holds the mitzvah doesn't apply today because of the Shalosh Shuas. But you might think that the Ramban still holds that it applies. Okay, the Ramban is the one that says that the mitzvah applies even bisman hazeh. So the Rashbash, Shlomo Reb Shimshon says like this in his Tshuva Siman Beis. V'hinei ein safik sha'adir b'Eretz Yisrael mitzvah gedolah hi. Living in Eretz Yisrael is a great mitzvah. B'chol eisu b'chol zman, even today. V'adoin yizakeni Ramban menoa miklal mitzvah saseh. He says, my great-grandfather, the Ramban, counted it among the mitzvah saseh, because he was an 8th generation descendant of the Ramban.
Who?
The Rashbash. Shneimar v'yirishtem oisav yishavtem bo. V'chein hi das adoin yavi Rashbat b'sefer Zohar Rakia. Amnam, mitzvah zu ein a mitzvah kolelis l'chol Yisrael b'galus achel hazeh. This mitzvah does not apply to all Jews during Galus. Aval hi nimnas b'chlal. It's actually forbidden. K'may sh'amru chazal ksubas, shehi miklal shvua she'yishbiya kodesh baruch Yisrael shelo yidchaku es haketz, v'shelo yalu b'chayma. He says it's one of the shalosh shvuas to go conquer Eretz Yisrael. Say re'eh ma ira livnei Ephraim, shemiru es haketz livnei b'koyd Hashem es amoy b'yitzis Mitzrayim. That the tribe of Ephraim, part of them went out of Mitzrayim early, and look what happened to them, they got killed. So therefore, he says it's forbidden to go up out of exile and go to Eretz Yisrael with masses of people. So what is the mitzvah? Therefore, the Rashbash says the mitzvah is for single individuals to go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay? And he says this as the pshat in the Ramban. That's the difference. He brought the Megillah Esther who argued on the Ramban, fine. But the Rashbash is more, because the Rashbash is saying, I hold like the Ramban, and yet, even the Ramban didn't say it as a mass movement. He just said individuals should go to Eretz Yisrael. V'ayin oid b'shayel shuvas harivash shegam hu hiskir hashvuas hanal. The Rivash also mentions the oaths. Shelo yalu b'choyma neged ratzon umas ha'olam ayin sham gam ha'knesses ha'gedola kasav. Let me turn the page. Hanishba shaloi ladu b'Eretz Yisrael. And this is really similar to the Rivash. The Knesset Yisrael is bringing down the Knesset HaGdolah. He says, Hanishba, someone makes an oath, Shaloi Ladu B'Eretz Yisrael, so is that oath chal? Right? If you make a shvuah not to do a mitzvah, it's not chal. It's a shvuah against the Torah. Mushba v'yoyim mihar Sinai. But here, he made a shvuah not to live in Eretz Yisrael, so near Elisha, shvuah chal alav. I hold that is called, that the oath is chal. Why? V'ein zeh b'chlal nishba levatel mitzvah shel Torah. She'ein shvuas echala. Kivan she'ein mitzvah yishuv Eretz Yisrael mefureshes b'Torah. Because the mitzvah is not a real mitzvah in the Torah. V'ein ela mitzvah midrabanan. Oh, so this is not like the Rivash, I'm sorry. The Rivash said it's a mitzvah deraisa. Just, it doesn't apply to everybody because you can't conquer. That's what the Rivash said. But here he's saying that it is a mitzvah derabanan. Ma'arach Chasoin B'tshuvas Ksivas Yad Shekasav Kain V'chein Matzasi Oid La'goyin Reb David ben Nachmias B'tshuvas Ksivas Yad V'hiskim Deloy Havya El Mitzvah D'Rabbanan V'ochiach Kain Mima Shaloi Manoah Rambam B'mitzvah Mitzvahs. So these poskim hold that the Rambam's reason for not counting it is because it's a D'Rabbanan. L'fichach kol suffix she's tapku ba azlin ba the kula. Every suffix that you have about Eretz Yisrael, you go the kula. Amnam ro'isi lahamabit b'tshuva shekasav she'en shvua chal alav. The mabit holds it's a shvua deraisa. It's a mitzvah deraisa, so therefore the shvua is not chal. V'haya davar tamua be'enai ad shemotzasi the Ramban b'asagoyis of the Sefer HaMitzvahs shemenah minin HaMitzvahs. Then I realized he's going in the Shittas Ramban v'shaloi kadas Rambam. V'nir she'olav samach hamabit b'tshuvas hayanal. The mabit went like the Ramban. Mikomakum tema be'enai she'azav sfaras Rambam v'nitla b'das Ramban. I guess this is Reb David ben Nachmias saying. He's saying he doesn't understand why the Mabit followed the Ramban over the Rambam. Why doesn't he mention the Rambam? Because he held the Rambam is much more of an important place than the Ramban. The Radvaz holds like the Rambam that the Shvua is chal because it's not a mitzvah. Ramban atzmoi b'parshas Masei al pasuk v'yirishtem oisav v'yishavtem ba. Achar shekasav shehi mitzvahs asay min haTorah siyem. The Ramban himself on this pasuk says, he says like he says in Sefer Mitzvahs, but then he says sherashi pirish she'ena mikra hazeh ela havtacha bilvad. That this pasuk v'yirishtem oisav v'yishavtem ba, Rashi learns differently. Rashi learns that it's only a promise. It's saying that if you're successful in displacing the 7 nations, then you'll be zoiche to live in Eretz Yisrael. But if not. It's a promise. The Ramban says, I disagree with Rashi. I hold it's a mitzvah saseh. Shal kibush haaretz v'yeshuva. Ayin sham. V'agoyin Reb Chaim ben Atar b'sefer Orach Chaim sham. Kasav shepshuta shel mikra k'pirish Rashi. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh holds like Rashi. V'shaloi k'pirish Ramban. Ayin sham. V'im kain loy nifles v'loy rechaika hi shitasei shel Rambam. So now we understand the Rambam. Shenir shesoiver k'pirish Rashi. Okay. So in the previous paragraph, he brought up people who say that the Rambam holds that it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and that's why he didn't count it. But now he's saying that it's a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah d'Rabbanan either. Living in Eretz Yisrael is not a mitzvah at all, and he holds the pshat in the pasuk is like Rashi. He holds the pshat in the pasuk is like Rashi that it's just a promise. Now, Vayoam Moshe Maimer Yishuv Eretz Yisrael Siman Hey. I want to show you the Rebbe says the exact same thing. He starts out with the Ramban and brings the different ways that have been said. The Avnei Nezer has a way to answer up the Rambam. But then he says like this. Paragraph Viro Isi. Over here. Viro Isi bo achroinim. Oidei ze terutzim. I see other terutzim on the Rambam. Avol afiani istaiti kulu shinui dechiki. They're all very forced. Lama ayin bohem vein laharich. V'tamani, and I'm amazed at them. Lama hutzruchu lidchot kol kach bozeh. Why do they have to go so far to explain the Rambam? Haloyev shulataritz beravcha. It's very simple. The Ramban b'parshas Masei al kasav v'rashtem esoretz v'shavtem ba shekasav sham. Interesting. He says the pasuk v'rashtem esoretz v'shavtem ba, and the way Rav Ovadya Yosef says it is v'yirishtem esoretz v'shavtem ba. Which one is correct? Huh? Yeah, you see the Rebbe got it right. V'hoirashtem esoretz, not v'yirishtem esoretz. Anyway, so v'hoirashtem esoretz v'shavtem ba shekasav sham. Zok the Ramban. Shaladai tohi mitzvah saseh. Hey v'yachar kach shadas Rashi einoi kain. He brings the Rashi, says not like that. El esover v'yishavtem ba einoi mitzvah ela havtacha. It's only a promise. El ashar Ramban siyem shadai tohi hu hoiker. The Ramban, of course, went the way he learns in Sefer Mitzvahs. Aval ein kein das Rashi zal. Uvar Chaim HaKadosh Sham hevi pluktas Rashi v'Ramban im hi mitzvah oy avtacha v'kasav achakach v'nir pshat advarim kedivei Rashi. He says the pasuk pshat in the pasuk is like Rashi. Mimash gamar oimer ki lachem, because the end of the pasuk is ki lachem nosati es ha'aretz l'resha soisa. Right? To you I gave the land to inherit. V'im ha'yeshiva hi mitzvah ha'yalei lis lo yispeaker ha-mitzvah v'lo yimar ki lachem nosati es ha'aretz l'sheves ba. Why does it end off l'resha soisa? He says, you shall displace the land and live in it, because to you I have given the land to live in it. The whole reason for displacing the people is in order to live in it, according to the Ramban. According to the Ramban, the whole thing is a mitzvah to live in it. Even if no one's living in it, you have to go live in it. So then why does the pasuk say, displace the people to live in it? Because I've given the land to you to displace the people. That's the reason? The reason should be to live in it, right? Elamai, you see the ikr is v'hoirashtem. The ikr is not v'yishavtem. Okay, v'ima yeshiva hi mitzvah ha'eloi lis lois b'ikra mitzvah v'loi mergilachem nesati zort l'reshes l'sheves ba ad kan l'shoinoi v'harei shegam b'orchaim ha'kadosh ha'gadoil l'achroinim. One of the greatest of achroinim is hichriya mipshad ha'kostuv k'divrei kedas Rashi zal she'ein mitzvah b'yeshivas Eretz Yisrael v'loi kedas Ramban zal el sha'achiyav hu l'hoiri sha'oivdi avodah zara. The mitzvah is to drive out those who do avodah zara misham shelo yilmadu hayoshvim shama mikvirasam, to make like a free zone where people can't be influenced by avodah zara. Kamash kasav Rambam zal b'mitzvahs hakrim takrimim sheyesh al zeh kama azharas b'Torah kedosha. The Torah speaks at length many times about making Eretz Yisrael free of avodah zara. V'im kain ein shum kusha al Rambam zal im soiver kedas Rashi zal. That it's not such a big stretch to say the Rambam held like Rashi. Shein bozeh mitzvah ela havtacha. It's only a promise. Okay? So, exactly what Rav Ovadya says, the Rebbe also says. And obviously the Rebbe has written before. He wrote this in 1960 or 1959. And we'll see in the Hemshech that he even read. Rav Ovadya Yosef even read by Yoel Moshe. So, it's likely that he got it from there. Okay. Now, V'al kol panim, back to the tshuva here. We're in the third paragraph on the page, on page 10. V'al kol panim, kvar hevenu divrei harashbash. We've already brought down the Rashbash. She'af zekeno Ramban. Even his grandfather, the Ramban, is moide begolus achel hazeh she'en li yistaken lichboi shes haaretz, that we should not go into Eretz Yisrael and make a battle. We shouldn't make ourselves in danger. And even if it's not dangerous, you shouldn't make a war to conquer the land, because it's actually forbidden to do that. Okay, so we have, on one hand, we have the Rambam holding that there's no mitzvah at all, and the Ramban holds there is a mitzvah, and the Rashbash explains that he doesn't mean there's a mitzvah today to conquer, just a mitzvah for individuals. This Chavalim Ba'Ne'imim is Rabbi Yehuda Leib Grobart, who was a Rav from Poland who came to Toronto in the 1920s and 30s, and he was the Rav in Toronto. Soif Chelakei Siman Mem Hey, and he says Shigam Ladas Ramban, that even according to the Ramban, Harei Hishbiya HaKadosh Baruch Hu Es Yisrael Shalo Yisaknu Es Nafsham La'alois B'choima. The Ramban says that you shouldn't. The Shalosh Shvuos are you should not go to Eretz Yisrael to put yourself in danger. Umishum dahava min, because you might have thought shekivan shemitzvahs yishuv Eretz Yisrael mitzvah gedoylahi, since the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael is a big mitzvah, ushkula kechol mitzvahs, and it's equivalent to all the other mitzvahs. Yavayu limsar nafsham aleha. People might come to put themselves in danger to do it. Kamash Malan al yidei shvua hanal sheizaru shelo yistaknu nafsham. The shvua, the Kamash Malan, not that you shouldn't go and put yourself in danger. Ayin Sham. Just interesting tshuva. I want to look at it for a second. So just flip the pages to the back. I printed it out. Last page of today's pages. The last page in your booklet there, after my book. After the English, last page. There it is. Chavalim Banaimim. It's a responsa sefer written by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Grobart in the 1930s. So he writes Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so he says, brings first paragraph, brings down the Ramban, then he brings the Megillah Esther, and then he says on this, V'al kol Rayosav, on the second paragraph on the Tshuva Mem Hey. So Simon Mem Hey, second paragraph. V'al kol Rayosav yesh Tshuva. There are ways to respond to every proof that the Megillah Esther brings. Masha Kasav Mishalo Yalu B'chayma. The Megillah Esther Taina is because of Shalo Yalu B'chayma. Adraba. Zer Raya Ramban. He says from the Shalosh Shvuos you have a proof to the Ramban. Why? She'im Yishuv Haaretz Einena Mitzvah. If living in Eretz Yisrael would not be a mitzvah, Lama Hayitzarach Lashbiyam. Why would you have to make an oath not to do it? You hear? A lot of people ask the question the other way around. They say, look, if there's a mitzvah to do it, how could there be an oath not to do it? He's going punkt fakert. If there's a mitzvah to do it, then we understand why there has to be an oath not to do it. If there would be no mitzvah, then okay, no one's going to try to do it. Why would any Yid want to go to Eretz Yisrael? There's no mitzvah. So why would Hashem have to make a shvuah not to do it? Hashem doesn't make a shvuah to do it, not to do every crazy thing in the world, right? But over here, there's a mitzvah to go there to Israel. Oh, so therefore, that's why you had to make them swear. Even though there's no havamina to go risk your life for other mitzvahs, because Eretz Yisrael is equivalent to all the mitzvahs, Parshas Re'eh, Siman and Gimel, over Tosefta, Avodah Zarah Perkei. So Hayam Makom Loimar. Therefore, a person might have thought Shechiv or Heter. It's either an obligation or it's at least a permission. Limsiras Nefesh Aleha, to go and risk your life for Eretz Yisrael. Lachein Hishpiyam Shelo Yisaknu. Therefore, Hashem made them swear not to risk their lives on this. Okay. That's that. So it's interesting shot in the Shalosh Shavuos. I mean, we hold the Shalosh Shavuos is austere even if you're not risking your life, even if you know for sure you're going to get through the battle without any casualties. You would still be austere to fight a war for Eretz Yisrael. But that's how he learns. All right. V'chein kasav hagayin Reb Tzadok HaKohen miLublin.
Oh, sorry.
No, now we're back to the page 2 of the notes today, which is Rav Ovadya Yosef's tshuva in the middle of this paragraph. V'chein kasav hagayin Reb Tzadok. The Reb Tzadok is the famous Hasidic rebbe. Reb Tzadok HaKohen miLublin. B'sefer divrei soifim moisid dalad shenir loy ikr kedas Megillas Esther. She'en kayoim mitzvahs aseh b'yishuv Eretz Yisrael el rak bizman beis hamikdash. This would be interesting to look up because people quote Reb Tzadok the opposite. You know, they quote Reb Tzadok in Tzidkas HaTzadik has a piece where he says that bizman ikvased the Mashiach, the chutzpah is going to succeed, and there'll be people who break into Eretz Yisrael and succeed. So some people say, okay, see from this Reb Tzadok held of Zionism. Well, first of all, he doesn't say it's mutter, he just says people will do it and succeed. But over here he says beferish that there's no mitzvah today al rak bizman hamikdash. V'chein hagoyin Rabbi Yosef Doiv Alevi Soloveitchik Shalos Tshuvas Beis Alevi Maskim.
That's not the one from.
No, this is great grandfather. The Beis Alevi.
His namesake.
Yeah. The one from YU, Yasha Ber, his father was Reb Moshe, and Reb Moshe's father was Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim's father was the Beis Alevi, his great-grandfather. So, Maskim Hoylech L'divrei Megillas Esther, he agrees to the Megillas Esther Anal, Ayin Sham, V'ayin Oid B'shalas Tshuvas Avnei Nezer, Uv'shalas Tshuvas Divrei Yisachar. So, maybe we'll see it someday, Mirz Hashem, but right now we're skipping over this. U'lefi zeh, comes out, Nimseinu l'meidem shegam l'Ramban ein shum mitzvah bizmanenu latzeis l'mulchama. There is no mitzvah to go conquer Eretz Yisrael today according to Ramban. So the Zionists are wrong. The Zionists quote the Ramban saying there's a mitzvah to conquer Eretz Yisrael and therefore we could give our lives for it and we should not give back the 1 inch of the West Bank even if it's going to lead to the Intifada. So there, no. It's not true. The Rav Ovadya Yosef.
Oh, yeah.
He says no. It's not true that the Ramban said that. Even according to the Ramban, there is no mitzvah to go out to war. Ulikanis b'sekanis nefashos k'dei lahagin al achzakis hashtachim hakvushim al yidenu b'nigud l'das umas oilam. The land that was conquered by us against the opinion of the umas oilam. It's a little bit difficult to pin to understand what he's saying. He's saying that it's because it's against the Umas Oilam. Which Umas Oilam? Which Umas Oilam does he mean? He means the Umas Oilam in the United Nations, the rest of the world, or he means any nations. So, the Shtachim is against all the nations of the world, pretty much. Until now, America all of a sudden changed because of Trump. But all the nations of the world were against what they did by holding on to the Shtachim. But the actual Medina that was made in 1948 was also done against the will of a bunch of nations. It was done by war, and they had to drive people out to make it. So, that's also against the Umas Oilam.
And they also bribed
the UN delegates to vote for them. Okay, Umar gam she'ein lanu melech v'sanhedrin. And then he goes further. He says, there's no melech today, and there's no Sanhedrin today. V'urim v'tumim hanidrashim l'chach. He says that you can't make a melchemes mitzvah today. So even if you're going to say not like me, you're going to say there is a melchemes mitzvah, but you can't make a melchemes mitzvah without a king, a Sanhedrin, and the urim v'tumim. K'moshe kasav Ramban atzmoi b'sefer mitzvahs. The Ramban himself agrees to this, Hasagas, and his commentary on Sefer mitzvahs lo yisaseh yud zayin, shemitzvah mutelas ala melech v'Sanhedrin. The mitzvah is on a king and a Sanhedrin, when they want to go out to fight a war, either a melchemes reshus, which is a optional type of war outside Eretz Yisrael, or the melchemes mitzvah, or even the melchemes mitzvah. The mitzvah is lishol b'urim b'tumim. You have to ask the urim b'tumim first, b'al pihem nis na'agu, and do whatever they say. K'moish nemar v'lifnei Elazar HaKohen yamoid v'shal loy b'mishpat urim lifnei Hashem. U'kumavur b'brachas gimel beis shekasher haya David mitzava oisam. When David decided to go to war, l'chu fashtu b'gdud hayu shoyalim b'urim b'tumim. They first asked the urim b'tumim. V'hi be'emes mitzvah l'doyres. It's not just a mitzvah for one time, for Yeshua or whatever. It's a mitzvah for all generations. V'loy eitza bilvad, and it's not just a good advice. K'demuchach b'Sanhedrin tesayin. Amad Aleph, the Aminin, V'dilma, the Sanhedrin, who the Kamer, Luhu Rachmana, the Lishai, Luhum V'tumim. You see, it's a chiv from the Torah that they should ask Urim V'tumim. V'nishar Kain B'maskana. V'chein Hiskim Megillas Esther Sham. Even the Megillas Esther, whose job was to defend the Rambam, in this instance, he does not defend the Rambam. He holds that the Rambam should have counted the Urim V'tumim as a mitzvah. Shemitzvah L'doyer Si V'yesh Lanu L'haviyah B'seif B'minyan Mitzvah. Sayin Sham. V'im kain, and therefore, b'keshe b'yadeinu lahachzir shtachim, v'im b'lim noyas takanas milchal mashal ha'oivim, if you can give back the West Bank and prevent a war, chayavim lasois kain mishum bikuach nefesh. You're chayav to do so to save lives. And then he says something about the Nesiv here, which maybe we'll see later. But the point he's making is that there's no mitzvah, even according to the Ramban, to fight a war today, and therefore you can't do it when lives are at stake. There's no mitzvah for two reasons. First of all, because the mitzvah today is changed because of the Shalosh Shvuos into an individual mitzvah. And secondly, there's no Melech, there's no Sanhedrin, there's no Urim Tumim.
And the Lubavitcher Rebbe says just the opposite. He said giving it back is a kind of nefashos, right?
Yeah, well, that's just a Metzias question. Giving it back is sakana or not, right?
Who?
Giving it back, because he mentions here that the Rambam, that there's a mitzvah of having the Urim Tumim and the Sanhedrin and the Melech, and that's why you can't have a war today. I want to just show you that in my book over here. Turn to the page. It's in English here. Achakala, yeah. When we're talking here about the Rambam, the famous question is, why doesn't the Rambam bring down the Shalosh Shvuos? So I wanted to show one of the reasons why he doesn't bring it is because he didn't need to bring it, because the Rambam already says in his Sefer, not in Sefer Mitzvahs, he doesn't bring the mitzvah of asking Urim Tumim, but he does say in the Shoroshim to Sefer Mitzvahs, in his hakdama there, where he brings different reasons why he doesn't count certain mitzvahs. So he says here, and I'm going to read it inside in the footnote here. He says, "V'oid kashe'ezkor ha-mitzvahs she'enam noegos el be'eretz Yisrael." When I mention a mitzvah that doesn't apply except in Eretz Yisrael, oy bifnei abayis, and it's a mitzvah, it only applies in the Beis Hamikdash times. Iyu asay oy loy sasay, whether they be a mitzvah sasay or not, or loy sasay. Oymar, I will say, v'zeh ein oy choyva el be'eretz Yisrael bifnei abayis. I'll tell you that it only applies during those times. V'yadua gam kein ki hakarbanis kulam. He says, some mitzvahs I don't have to tell you that they don't apply today. Why? Because it's obvious. If a mitzvah is obviously only a mitzvah of karbanis, and it only applies in the Beis Hamikdash, v'chein dinei nefashos. And the same thing, capital punishment. Ein danim bohem el bizman shebeis Hamikdash kaim. V'yadu gam kein she'hanavua. The mitzvahs that relate to prophecy, and the mitzvahs that relate to kingship. Kvar nistalku mimenu. All those mitzvahs don't apply today. Ad she'nosur minu avonos she'anachnu machzikim bohem. Until we do tshuva, v'yechaper lanu v'yirachmenu, k'moi she'yadenu v'yachzirem lanu. And Hashem brings them back to us, k'moi she'amar, like it says in the pasuk. V'yadua. Oh, and here's the part we want. V'yadua she'hamilchamos v'kibush haratzos. The fighting wars and conquering lands, lo yiyeh el b'melech, they only happen through a melech. Uva'atzah sanhedre gedola, the Cohen Gadol. You have to have the Sanhedrin, you have to have the Cohen Gadol. K'moshe Amar v'lifnei Elazar Cohen Yamoid. So even though he didn't count it as a mitzvah, but he did consider it an obligation to consult the Urim Tumim. And therefore he says, any mitzvah that's dependent on these things, or any mitzvah, any type of war, even the milchemes mitzvah, I don't have to tell you that it doesn't apply today. Because it's included in what we just said. So the Rambam says, I don't have to tell you that conquering Eretz Yisrael doesn't apply today. It's Pashut, it doesn't apply. So I don't need to tell you about the Shalosh Shvuos because it's Pashut. Okay, it's going to be an extra Isser of the Shvuah. But besides that, the Rambam doesn't have to tell you that it doesn't apply to conquer Eretz Yisrael today. Okay, so it's the exact same thing that Rav Ovadya said here. All right, let's turn the page. The oid, okay? Turn back to the tshuva here at the beginning, and then the page starts with the word oid.
Okay, I got it.
One more page, I think.
Not this goes.
We're on page.
This?
Page.
Vod yesh makom loymar?
Yeah, that's it. V'oid yesh makom loymar. There's another argument that could be said here. Shafilu im timtze loymar shel das Ramban kibush Eretz Yisrael v'achzakos v'yeheges af bizman hazeh. Even if you're going to say that the Ramban holds that the mitzvah does apply today to conquer the land. Mitzvah sasem in Torah he. Mikol makom b'kibush shalanu. He says when the Zionist conquest she'ein lanu shlita mulea al kol anasa b'shtachim, that we don't have power over what goes on in the territories. And by the way, everything he says about the territories is not just the territories. Like I'm pointing out as we go, it applies to the whole Eretz Yisrael because they really conquered the whole Eretz Yisrael in the opposition to the Shalosh Shvuos. So people think Rav Ovadya Yosef only said it about the territories. L'choyer, the same applies to the 48 borders too. Kitzer, loy nechshav l'kibush gomer. He says the conquest of the Zionists is not really conquest. Shetzivsa Allah v'Torah. U'kamoy shekasav kayotze bozeh agoyin mekutna b'shal shuvas yeshuas malkoi. She'ikra mitzvah alibeder Ramban eino ela keshayirusha v'hayeshiva hi ke'adam mo'esta b'soich shaloi. The mitzvah is only when you have the right to do whatever you want there. V'zu mitzvah b'kibush Eretz Yisrael shatiyah tachas chezkasenu v'yirushasenu v'lo yalbir reikani shel ata. Not like when we're here now that we could just come and we can't control anything. We can't drive anybody out. They live in their cities. It's palaces. It's a word from the Torah. Even those nations who do avodah zarah, the Muslims don't, but there are Christians there who do. So we can't get them out of there. Against the Torah, even the churches, they stand exactly as they were, and the government actually protects them. Nobody objects to this. The only reason why people don't object is because they're afraid of the nations. So therefore he says that's not called a conquest. The Rebbe goes further. He says it's an aveira to conquer it. Rav Ovadya Yosef is trying to be powerful about it. He says, I'm not saying it's an aveira, but at least it's not a mitzvah. This is not the mitzvah of the Ramban. Therefore, we can't put ourselves in danger for the sake of these territories. And especially we could say that today he says that living in the territories became very dangerous. He says, it's dangerous to live there. It's only an army, military presence that we have there, but it's not a real yishuv arts. We can't even drive through. That's not included in the mitzvah according to the Ramban. Are you going to tell me these Zionists who say that you have to hold on to the West Bank, are they going to go a step further and say, like Kahananicks, kick every Arab out of Eretz Yisrael? No. Even they don't say that. Only the terrorists from the Kahana groups, they say that. But not everybody else said that. So Elamai, but you're going to tell me we have to do that? Elamai, you hold that doesn't apply today, so therefore don't be against giving it back. Okay. Then he brings an interesting proof. Rei b'kisvei Ramban, Maduras Reb Chaim David Shvel, Amud Tav Kuf Tesvav, Perusha the Shir Shirim. This is the Ramban on Shir Shirim. It's really not the Ramban. Really, I think it's Rabbeinu Ezra, but they say it's the Ramban. People used to think it was the Ramban, so they printed it under his name. And he says, Lo Asti Lavoy, in the future, Yavoyu Anefutzais Hamfuzarais Bein Ho'amim. The Jews scattered in exile will come. They'll appoint for themselves a leader, who Mashiach ben David, Asher Haya Imahim Begalus, who was with them in Galus, Uverishya in Malchei Ha'umais, and with the permission of the nations, Uve Ezrasam, and with the help of the nations, Yelchu Eretz Yisrael. They will go to Eretz Yisrael. K'dichsiv veheviu es kol achechem mikol agayim. That all the nations will bring the Jews from the Galus to Eretz Yisrael. And his kingdom will last. Okay, so that's the Ramban Shir Shirim. So what's interesting about this, the Zionists took out from here that their return to Eretz Yisrael, which happens before Mashiach, will happen through the permission of the nations. But he says not like that. He says that only when Mashiach comes it will happen. He says, Haresh Gama Ramban Maskim. Shafilu Mashiach ben David. Even when Mashiach does come, B'tchilas he's galusta, at least at the beginning, Yavai Ach V'rach B'rishin Umais. He'll only come to Eretz Yisrael with permission. B'lil Alois B'chayma, not to go up as a wall. B'lil Yisgaris B'umais, and not to fight against any nations. Okay? So I wanted to show you where he got that from. Because like the other things you've been saying here, all the good stuff he says really comes from Vayol Moshe. Turn to Samach Ches in Maimer Shal Shavuos. Maimer Shal Shavuos, Siman Samach Ches. Hinei Hamaharsim Lakhu Gula Me'atma Ma'idei Hishtadlis Meguna Eitzel Humais. That the Zionists took themselves redemption by going to the nations, by going to the UN, and doing hishtadlis, trying to get them to agree to it. Lasois k'ma'aseyim, to go and vote for a state. So toilem atzmam be'ilon gadol haRamban zal, and they pretend to be following the Ramban. B'shir shirim shekasav sheberishyon malchei hu'umais uvi'ez rastam yelchu l'Eretz Yisrael, that with the permission of the nations they'll go to Eretz Yisrael. K'duchsiv Yishai samach vav ve'aviris kol achechem. So it's up to Rebbe. Anybody who has a brain in his head, and looks inside at the Ramban, he says the Zionists don't have anything to say about this. Reshis, the first of all, it goes on this pasuk in Yishaya. This is going after the war of Gog and Magog. That all the nations will gather together. They'll all speak about the greatness of Hashem. Then they'll bring back the Yidden from Galus. Okay? It's going after Mashiach comes. It's not talking about the Gula, how it will be. Gula already happened. Mashiach's already here. They'll bring the leftover Yidden who are in Galus back to Eretz Yisrael. Remez kiloi bekashtam uvecharbam yirshu aretz. The symbolism of saying, Chazal say that Mashiach will be a poor man riding on a donkey. Why do they say that? Because it's a mashal. It means that they won't inherit Eretz Yisrael through their sword and their bow. V'loi besus v'rechev, not by horses and chariots. It will be the Hashem who he'll be the one who causes them to fall to them. They won't even need weapons. They'll go by the mightiness of Hashem. Basically, the point is that this will not happen. Before Mashiach comes, and it won't happen with war. It will happen when Mashiach comes, and even then there won't be wars. So it's exactly what he said here, and I'm sure he saw this in the rebbe, because Ovadya Yosef pretty much read every sefer. You can see from the way he quotes Svarim, and especially this sefer, you're about to see that he saw it. Okay. So, just continuing here. Sorry, I lost the place here. Okay. V'loya kache. We're on the page that the first word is v'oid, and we're on the last paragraph of the page. V'loya kache. Now I'm saying a new thing now. I'm not going to deny ki hamarach vital, Rav Chaim Vital, Bakdamas Eitz Chaim, in his introduction to Eitz Chaim, Kosav, shezman hashvua shaloi la'oyer ha'geula ad shetechbatz, Hu ad elef shana. But there are Zionists who made the argument, starting with Rav Ovadya Yosef in the 50s, already made this argument in his Shalas Chuvas Yaskil Avdi, that the Shvua has his man. The Shvua, Shalosh Shvuas have an expiration date. And what's the expiration date? 1,000 years. 1,000 years after the Churban, that's when the Shvuas stop applying. Ukamash calls b'sefer Zohar Parshas Vayera that it says Kol Hayoim Dava, all the day we're going to be sad. and alone, and kol hayoyim, a yoyim of a Kodesh Baruch Hu is elef shana. Okay, v'ayin oid lamar and achida b'shem agdolim. So they say this thing about the shvuah expiring after 1,000 years. Now, you know, Vayol Moshe in Ma'amer Shal Shvuah, Siman Ayin, and Ayin Beis, Ayin Aleph, Ayin Beis, he speaks about this time at length, and he completely destroys it. He shows that the Chaim Vital never said anything about our shvuah. He's talking about the Kodesh Baruch Hu's oath that he took. Asher Nishbati B'Api, Yimivoyin Al Menuchasi. Hashem swore not to bring back the Yidden from Galus. That shvuah has a date of 1,000 years. But the shvuah on the Klal Yisrael, that never expires. Okay, Ulam. However, Mikomakam Mistimas Divrei Hashas Nireh Shashvuah Shelo Yichachus Haketz V'Shelo Limrud B'Umas Ha'olam Hi Le'olam. Rav Ovadya says even if they say this, but it's against the Gemara never says such as man. Ad Bias HaMashiach, until Mashiach comes. V'chein Muchach L'Hedya Mitargum Yonasan Ben Uziel Al HaPasuk Yishbati Eschem. The Targum Yonasan, which the Rebbe quotes in, I think, Simon Chafei, Shalosh Shvuos, and other places, is that Targum Yonasan says that the third oath in Shir Shirim is going on in Moisei Mashiach. Even when Mashiach comes, he'll be telling Klal Yisrael, don't violate the oath. V'chein Muchach Midivri HaRambam Be'igeres Teman, the Rambam, who lived after 1,000 years from the Churban, the Rambam lived in 1100s, right, which is after 1,000 years, and he applied the oaths to the false Mashiach in Yemen. Medivrei Rashbash b'tshuva Hanal, he also lived after 1,000 years. V'chein Medivrei Rivash. V'ayinoid b'yefei soyar al Medrash Rabbah v'yikra. Ure'oid the Ma'ara Galanti, Rav Ram Galanti b'sefer Schus Avos per Kamad Avos al Mishnah v'alti Sfada l'Rishus, that don't bring up the demons or something like that, or don't do something wrong that will cause the shadim to attack you, which means don't be over on the shuas. V'roisi shekvar herich mo'oid bazeh b'sefer vayol Moshe al divrei Reb Chaim Vital v'achida anal. Like I said, vayol Moshe in Siman Ayin Aleph Ayin Beis speaks at length about this Reb Chaim Vital, and he says me'amud pei hey. He says, look on page Pei Hey in Vayol Moshe. So obviously he's looking at it. Umisham be'era, and understand it from there. Bein kan makam laharich. Doik ki kutzarti. So he says, I don't have to say it. You can look it up in Vayol Moshe, and you'll see that.
Where does he say Vayol Moshe?
The last two lines here. Second to last line.
Oh, okay.
So he's saying basically, even the Chidah, even the Chaim Vital never said that the shuas have an expiration date. But even if they do, it's against all these other poskim. Okay?
Oh, so he puts him in a sympathetic manner.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think this whole tshuva is built on Vayol Moshe.
Oh, that's nice.
His understanding of the Ramban, his understanding of the Rambam. So far we saw a few points, right? The Ramban, he said, never said to fight a war. That's Vayol Moshe. The Rambam holds there's no mitzvah, it's only a promise. That's Vayol Moshe.
So he passes like him.
And yeah, and then this thing of the Ramban and say it in Shir Shirim, he understands exactly the way Vayol Moshe understood it. What else? And now we have this Reb Chaim Vital, he's quoting Vayol Moshe. So like one point after another.
Chaim Vital. I mean, that's 500 years ago.
Yeah, no, he's quoting the Vayol Moshe's way of learning Reb Chaim Vital. So basically one point after another, you see that he is basing his whole tshuva on Vayol Moshe. That's the widespread influence of the Sefer Vayol Moshe. You realize there was really no competition for it ever. The Rebbe wrote a Sefer. Nobody ever was ever able to write a Sefer that was against it, because the points it makes are so strong and so well established. All the poskim of the generation, Rav Ovadya Yosef, and the Sfardim, and everybody else, basically, the Rav Shach, everybody took into account what Vayol Moshe said.
And what about Rabbi Aviner and the Kasher?
Okay, they tried, but, Mitzvah Hashem, maybe we'll get to their Sfarim, we'll try to take them apart. All right.